we even get into Maya, we have to make sure that we're set up and staying organized, just like Cinema was, or just like your previous Maya classes were. It's very important that everything we do stays organized so that we don't lose stuff and stuff stops working. So on your computers, everyone in here has used PCs before because you've at least had the intro class. You're going to find a P drive on your computer. Okay? So on your P drive, it should be under this PC or whatever it's called. Find the P drive. Make a new folder called your last name underscore F17. So don't write your last name, write whatever your actual last name is. Okay, so I wrote Sarcona underscore F17. If you already have me with another class, you can use the same F17 folder. Inside that folder, you'll make a brand new folder called 2520. Okay, Sarcona F17 is our last name and the semester that they're taking this class. 2520 is the number of this class, the modeling and rendering. We can go into that. Now this we're going to keep empty. Okay, if this was Cinema, we would create a folder structure inside here. And Maya will actually create it for us, okay, which is super awesome. So we want to let Maya do it because it creates a bunch of different folders for us, okay. So you'll see inside here it says your project name and it has some specific folders. We'll create those afterwards, okay. So that's all we need to do as far as our folder structure goes. Every project that we do, we'll make a brand new project folder and we'll make sure that we have everything set up, and then we'll go on to the next area. We want to do one more thing. Go back to your P drive. And you may see this folder in your P drive. Does anyone see a Maya folder on your P drive? Okay. So Maya is super awesome in that it takes your preferences and it saves your preferences right to the P drive. Okay? So what that means is that we can update our preferences every single class. We can customize how we're working and speed up our workflow. So the hotkey list that you have is only the tip of the iceberg. We can customize Maya like crazy to make our workflow super quick, which is amazing. All right. So if you see this folder, go into the folder. There should be a version of Maya that you've worked on, okay, or that somebody has opened up. So on my computer, I've used Maya 2016.5, I used 2017, and I've used 2018. Okay, so it shows a folder for each one of those versions. So I'm going to delete the 2018 folder. Okay, actually I think I can delete that because I don't need it. All right, so delete your 2018 folder if you have a 2018 folder. Now what that does is it deletes my preferences. Okay. The reason we want to do that is because we don't know what lunatic was on these computers before and what they might have set up. Okay? I've had it in the past where people will change like what the move tool is, what the scale tool is. So try to move or scale something without knowing the actual hotkey can be really frustrating. All right? So every day you come in, you should delete the old preferences, and then before you leave, you're going to copy your preferences, okay, so that you have a backup you can replace them with. All right? So now we can close all those windows and open up Maya. This is the quick way to open up Maya. It looks like everyone here is a pro anyway. Just click on the Windows key on your keyboard and just start typing MAYA. Okay? And then find your appropriate Maya version 2018. Some of the intro classes I have to walk through how to do that. You may see something like this, probably not because you don't have any other versions of Maya in yours. Because I have 2017 and 16, it's saying, do you want to copy those preferences or create new ones? I'm always deleting mine because of schooling, so I just create default preferences every time. If you worked at a company and you were at 2016 one day and the next day you came in, you're at 2017, you probably want to copy your preferences over because some people will not work on another station unless they have their preferences. How you customize Maya is super important to your workflow. I know people who will work once it updates. It's still thinking. We'll just let it think. There it goes. Whew. All right. You may see this window pop up. You can just say, don't show this at startup, and hit OK. I know some people who work like this where everything is gone. Okay, there's no menus, there's nothing available. Everything is just done using their own custom system that they've set up and built into their stuff. Okay. Now, you'll find if you are new to Maya, and again, forgive me if you aren't new to Maya, we are going to do a little bit of a review. That way, in case you did forget stuff, you'll see it again. Maya's interface is completely different than Cinema, and how you work is completely different than Cinema. A lot of what we do in here is still going to happen in this main viewport area, but how we get to those results is going to be modified a bit. Okay? Just to point out a couple things. On the left side here, these are selection methods. Okay? So Cinema had these, but they were all kind of nested inside of one little button. Here is move, here's rotate, and here's scale. Okay? In Cinema, and I just taught the Cinema class last hour, so we had to go over this too. Your rotate in Cinema is, does anyone remember from years ago? R, right? Your rotate is R. In Maya, it's E. Makes no sense at all. Okay? So your rotate tool in Maya is E, and then R is set for scale. That makes complete sense, right? Now, the nice thing about it is they are right at the top. So if you see the QWERT, those are hotkeys that you will commonly use. Okay? QWERTY. You just don't use the Y. So those hotkeys you'll use. Get used to using the move tool, the rotate, and the scale tool, obviously. What is really nice about Maya is you don't have to go to a selection tool to actually select stuff. In Cinema, you did. If you wanted to select something, you'd have to go to a select tool, select the item, and then you could do something with it. Maya, you don't. You can just be in any one of these move, rotates, or scales, and you can marquee and select stuff and move stuff around. It's super awesome. Okay? Down here on the left are different ways that you can organize your panels. Okay? So a panel is simply just a layout of how you have stuff, windows popped up. Right now we have a one perspective view set up. If we click on the next one down, that's a 4 view. So you've seen this in Cinema before too. You have the perspective view and you have your front, top, and side view. Okay. Then there's one that's outliner and perspective, or sorry, 2 views, side by side. And then you have this show or hide outliner that you could add to it. Okay. So the biggest thing is that you can use these default ones, but you can also customize them. So sometimes when I'm animating, I'll have certain windows up and I want to save those layouts. Okay. Under panels, layouts, save layouts, I can make use one of these, or I can edit my own layout and make a brand new one if I want to. Okay. So these are all different ones. These are regular layouts. These are other layouts that you could use. So you may find at some point we're jumping to one layout or another one, especially because I don't have 2 monitors. Typically when I'm working at one of those stations and I have 2 monitors, or this station I have 2 monitors, my main Maya window is up here, and then if I'm watching a tutorial, I'll put it on the other screen, or I will have my panels over there, or something else on this screen. That way I can efficiently move between stuff without cluttering. This window will be cluttered because it's on my screen, because it's on this one screen. All right. Okay, timeline, still the same thing. You saw that inside Cinema 4D. There's a timeline. Unlike Cinema, you can't grab keyframes and just move them. We actually have to cut them and paste them and do some other stuff. But let's ignore that for now. Over here are the layers. So the layers work pretty much the same way that they did in Cinema. You put something on a layer, you can hide it, you can make it visible, you could lock it, anything, okay? So we can still do that. They still don't mean anything as far as what is on top of another object. So if a layer is on top, that means nothing as far as what is physically on top of something, right? Because we're in 3D. This area here is the channel box. So if we go to create an object, so you should see little icons right here on the far left. That's a poly modeling and there's some stuff. So click on one of those far left objects. Okay. When you click on those, you'll see there's translates, rotates, and scales. So inside Cinema, they would basically have this in kind of like a hidden area of the interface. In Maya, it's a more used thing. We're constantly moving stuff and making sure it's snapped and scaled to a specific area. Okay, so that's what this area is for here. Here's another thing that's different about Maya, is that we have what's called history. Okay, underneath my P-Sphere 1, way down here it says Polysphere 1. If you click on that, you'll see there's a subdivision axis and a subdivision height. Cinema had this kind of stuff. When you made an object initially, you could tweak things like the radius and the subdivisions. In Cinema, once you started editing the points, you could no longer edit any of those features. In Maya, you still can. Okay? So there is no make editable button. The second I made an object, I could edit it. Okay? Which is super awesome. So this thing here will actually fill up. As we start modeling stuff, where it says Polysphere 1, everything we do to it, we extrude, we bevel, we split, we do whatever, that list will start getting bigger and bigger and bigger because we can edit some of those things. Not all of them. Okay, you could edit all of them, but it won't do us any good at some point. Okay, so that's where our history is going to be. Here's some just options. We'll get into that later. Here is our shelf. Now, or our menu bar. Now here's where it gets crazy. Okay, Maya has this menu bar right here. Okay, so you see that menu bar right there. If I go here, I can switch that menu bar to a different menu bar. And then I can switch that menu bar to another menu bar. Okay? And I can get to any one of these menus. Depending on what I'm doing, I can change that little bar that goes across. Now the reason for that is because, again, some things are kind of clustered in certain areas. So if I'm modeling, it makes sense to be in a modeling menu and see all the modeling tools. If I'm animating, it makes sense to see all the animation tools. Okay? So in this case, I love Maya because everything is laid out. Anytime I need to go into a tool, I can go right here and see all the tools that are available. In Cinema, a lot of the times it was reliant upon what we had selected as to what would show up. Okay? So I would know when I go to, let's say, the Make Hole tool, that it would do something. Like there's a box and I could, I don't know how to use the Make Hole tool. I never used it. There we go. I made a hole. Right? Perfect. All right. So, glorious. I made a hole. So you can do that. Okay? Same thing with the animation. Now, one thing I think is cut off of my screen. Yes, it was. Okay? Way on the bottom here, this is a help line. You may not be able to see it too good, but the very bottom of your screen, there's a little thing that tells you what to do with a tool. So when I went back to that Make Hole tool, it would actually say, select first outer face, telling me what to do. So I would select an outer face. And then it would say select second face from the same object. And now hit enter. Perfect. I don't know what that did. Made a hole. All right. I don't use the Make Hole tool ever, so it's there. So that's what's nice about it, though, is that we do have the ability to see every single thing that is available. You can also change the workspace. This is a newer thing. I think 2017 is when they started it. It may have been 2016.5, but you can actually change your workspace based on what you're doing. This is very similar to what Cinema had. When you edited UVs in Cinema, you would go to UV editing and it would change your entire interface to UV editing. Okay? I never ever work like that. I like to pop up the windows I need, do what I need in them, and then get out of that as soon as possible. Okay? Now the other thing, we see these here. This is called a shelf. Okay? Have you ever been in a program like Photoshop or Illustrator where you're constantly doing the same thing? You go to this menu, then this menu, then that menu. Then you go this menu, that menu, that menu. By constantly doing that, it's freaking annoying, but Maya allows us to save these things. Okay? So we can actually make our own shelf and put our own custom icons on that shelf for use at any point. Okay? And so that'll save us time and it'll make our workflow go a lot quicker. So one of your shelves should be called custom. Okay? Do you see where it says custom for custom shelf? All right, and there's nothing on it, right? It's completely empty. So we're going to add some items to our shelf. So the way we add an item is we hold Control and Shift, and we go to that item. All right? So watch me first, and then you can do it. So I'm going to hold Control and Shift. I'm going to go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. Okay? Now it looks like nothing has happened. Okay? Maya does not throw off bells and whistles when something happens. It's just, it happened. So if I let go of my left hand and I click in my shelf area again, you'll see that I now have a button called Hist in my shelf. So do that. Hold Control Shift, go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. Good. Nothing exploded. Okay. Notice that there's also two. There's a delete by type history and a delete all by type history. Okay? So delete by type history deletes whatever I have selected's history. Delete all by type history deletes all the history in the entire scene. Okay? So if I have an animation and I have a character walking, if I were to delete history on the character, that means that he would no longer be walking because his history is all the stuff that went into making him walk. So that stops walking. Okay? Deleting an individual object is where I would do that. If I had an animation, I would do the all by, or if I didn't want to do it on an animation, I would do the individual. If I didn't care, then I would do it on everything. Typically on a modeling setup, for just modeling stuff, I would use the all. I have a scene, I want to make sure there's no history on anything because I'm going to import it into Substance or into some other random program. I do the delete all by type, but I don't use it enough to actually warrant going into the all by type button. Okay? So just so you can see what that's going to do, remember my polysphere over there that I said was history? When I click on that, now it's gone. Okay? So that piece of history is gone. I can't go back and edit that little piece of what it was able to do. Okay? So now we're going to add another one. So hold Control Shift again, and we're going to go to Modify Center Pivot. Okay, so we should have two in there. One of them is delete by type history and center pivot. Good, cool. We're going to add the outliner. So Control Shift, Window Outliner. Anything else in here? I can get that another way. That should be good for now. Okay? As you get more comfortable with the software and you see, hey, I'm constantly going to this menu or I'm constantly going to grab this, add it to your shelf. Okay? I want to also customize my shelf so that it's obviously a Sean's shelf instead of just a random custom one. So if I go to my little gear on the far left of my shelf and I say shelf editor, I can give this a name. So I can just say rename. Make sure you do the left rename and not the right rename, because the left one is the shelf's name. Sarcona shelf. Okay. Yes. So inside of there, we could actually do a whole bunch of stuff. Eventually, we'll get more into what we can do with these. The underlying structure of Maya is awesome in that everything is a little program. Okay. So when I go to delete history, what's happening is it's calling this little program called delete history and deleting the history. When I go to center pivot, it calls a little program called center pivot and it runs that. And I go to the outliner, it calls a program called outliner and runs that. Now because of that, just to kind of point out some other stuff, if I were to try to rename this and I put a space in here, it may not like that. And it says your shelf has an illegal name. Because everything is based on this like programming mentality, it wants no spaces in anything. Okay, so as you name stuff, make sure you use underscores for things. Cool. Good. All right. Now we're going to go down to our preferences. So on the far right, you see this little guy, and he's a little running man with a gear chasing him. Click on the running man with the gear chasing him. All right, these are the Maya preferences. There's another way to get to it, but that's the best way to do it. Start at the top. Go to Interface. Okay, looking at Interface, halfway down you'll see one that says Highlight What's New. This is the menu box that popped up right at the beginning that said, do you want to highlight what's new? And I said, don't show again. That's where you could change it. So what this is going to do is, if you've used Maya before, it'll be more obvious to you. But there's some stuff that's new and you want to see what it is. So right now it's highlighting everything that's new in green. So if I go to one of my tools, I know Create, there it is. This and this are two new things. Create Polygon, there's a couple new things inside here too. So it'll show you, here's the new features of it, just so you are aware of it. If you've never used Maya, it's all new to you, so that doesn't matter. Okay? But I like to keep it on just so that I'm still aware of it, because every once in a while you'll get to a menu that's like, holy cow, what's that? User interface elements. Okay? So click on that one. So all the stuff that we're seeing in our viewport is a user interface element. We can turn things on or turn things off with this. So if I go to shelf and I click that box, look what happened to my shelf. Do you see how it just disappeared, right? Now, why is this important? Because most likely you're going to click something that you didn't mean to click. Like that. And you may have to come back in here and turn stuff back on and move stuff back into place in order to get things back where they should be. I just ruined it. I don't know what I've done. I tried to demonstrate something and I ruined it. Oh, failure. Come on, just get back in there. Shelf editor, shelf tabs. I'll play with this later. All right, just ignore that for now. It's so annoying. Just want you to get back there. Maybe it's way up here. Like if I just drag that, no. I'll fix that later. Like I said, I'll fix it later. All right, so you can turn stuff on and off that way. All of these things up here too, this is going to be kind of annoying. They could just disappear. As you click on things, there are certain ways that students find that they make things disappear. That's one. Let's see, don't need to worry about that too much. If you don't see something, obviously you can go to UI elements and make sure it's showing there. But help, every single one of your menus up here will show you what the item does. I think I have to wait till I'm out of this window. There it is. So see how I hover my mouse and it'll tell me this is what this button does. So definitely helpful if you get to that point where you're like, what does this do? What does this do? Okay. This helps you change the speed. So 2 seconds, if you don't want to wait 2 seconds because you're always going there, set it for something different. Display, that should be fine. Okay, all of these different settings are different things that you could set up inside of your stuff. The next one we're going to go down to is settings. Now looking at our cheat sheet, do you see where it says at 30 frames per second? Okay, so all of our animations that we're going to do are 30 frames a second. So when we come in here, we want to set our time to 30. I don't know why I got a weird error. Yeah, I don't know. That might be something. That's a new feature, I think. We'll just ignore it. In Maya, you can actually ignore errors, and sometimes that's okay. Because of how it's set up, this error may have nothing to do with what we're doing. Okay? So we'll just ignore it. If something pops up, we'll deal with it. Notice, too, Maya has an up axis of Y. Every 3D program is different. We will be working between different 3D programs, so that's an important feature that we have to be aware of. Because when we take something from our model and we want to 3D print it, the 3D printer is going to do that to it. So we fix it there, but just so you're aware of it, it will do that. Okay. We're working in centimeters. Okay. As we build stuff that is more realistic, we want to focus on having a more realistic scale. So before in the intro class, it was whatever you feel like it, just push and pull and move stuff around. In this class, we want to build stuff closer to realistic scale. It doesn't have to be accurate 100%, but closer. So if we were to build this room, I wouldn't just stretch out a cube and say it's the room. I would literally want to see, this is 10 feet high ceilings, maybe, I don't know, looks like 10 feet, right? And then I would go to Google and I would type in 10 feet to centimeters, and it would give me probably 300 centimeters. I think that's the thing. There are 2.54 centimeters in an inch. That's a foot. That's 10 feet, 304.8. Okay, close enough, right? So I would make sure my cube is 300 units tall, because that's 300 centimeters tall. And then based on that, then I could figure out a good length and a good width, okay? Now the reason we do that is not just because we want to be anal about it, but the more accurate our model is, the more accurate our lighting is going to be, and the more accurate our shadows and everything else are going to be, okay? The intro class, we didn't care, we were just having fun. Fun's gone. What else? Let's see. I think the next thing we just want to play with is the undos, but I'm just zipping through. Let's jump to that real quick, selection, just so you can see it. Okay? There's an underlying selection hierarchy that happens. Okay? I have an entire building and scene environment inside of my Maya viewport, and I draw a marquee box over the top of it. It's not going to select everything that I've just marqueed. It selects what's important first, and then second, and then third, and then fourth. Okay? So the highest thing on here that we would typically deal with, let's say, is not control vertex, an IK handle. Okay? So an IK handle is something you would use in animation. So if I marqueed an entire scene and had a character with an IK handle, it would just grab the IK handles. It wouldn't grab anything else in the scene. Okay? That's important because as you're getting frustrated, dragging over something over and over again and not sure why it's not selecting it, that's why. You don't have to change anything here. You just have to be aware that there is a hierarchy, and you just have to change your view or change what you're selecting. Okay? Snappings there is cool. Time slider is good. Undos. Okay. So in cinema, I'm trying to think if I ever hit an undo limit. I don't think so. In cinema, I'm not sure if there is an undo limit, but Maya does have an undo limit. Okay? Everything you do, you select, you deselect, you select again. Those are all areas where we could undo it. Okay? So that could eat up a lot of memory and slow your computer down a lot. I typically leave my undo queue size to 50. As a beginner, I would set it to at most 200. Okay? But you can see there is an infinite. If you do that, your computer could slow down a lot once you hit about the hour mark. Okay? Think about selecting this point, and then this point, and then that point. It's remembering all of those different selections. So if you want, set this to 200. Okay, and then that should be it. Oh, one more, projects and files. That's one. All right, so for people who don't like to redo work that they've lost because they haven't saved anything, there is an autosave feature inside of Maya. Okay, so I typically don't have this on because I just like to live dangerously, but you definitely could. If you click the enable for autosave, you can tell it how many minutes you want between autosaves, and then you could be good with that. Okay?
So to do autosave, is there a way you can tell the staff tell you autosaves every so many minutes?
Yes. You would buy the full-blown version,
okay,
and then you wouldn't get the warning that says this is a student version. In Maya, you'll get a warning every time you save that says this is a student version. You cannot make money off this. Are you sure you want to save, whatever? And you have to hit yes. So when you do use autosave, every, in this case, 10 minutes, you're going to get that pop-up, and then you have to hit OK. Pop-up, and hit OK. The idea with any kind of saving, save as often as you don't mind going back and redoing it if you didn't save, right? So if you are fine doing an hour's worth of work over again, then save every hour. That way, in case something crashes, you only have to do an hour's worth of work. If you only save once a day, then if something crashes, you're going to have to go back and redo that entire day's work. Okay? So, if you want, enable autosave. Usually I forget to save, so it doesn't matter anyway. Get my shelf back. What else? We have this here too. So Cinema did have something like this inside of each viewport. If you are a older Maya user, under the renderer, there used to be more options here. They've eliminated those other options, and we just have viewport. Okay, that might cause some issues now because we kind of use that for correcting some issues that it had before. We'll find out. And then there's a whole bunch of buttons here. Okay, so this is like a mini shelf, but this helps us adjust things and play with some different features. Similar stuff is like right here. Okay, so we'll again play with those kinds of features. All right, cool. Now, if we remember from Cinema, there were 3 things that we always did for every time we were working, every time we were trying to move around the viewport. We orbited, which is spinning around our object. We tracked it, which is like moving the object off to the side or moving the scene off. And then we zoomed in and out, right? So Maya has the same thing. And what's nice is that they're the same. Yeah. And that's amazing because in some programs they're not the same. Now, if it plays nicely, we'll find out. I'm just going to save my preferences real quick. You can go to File, Save Preferences, and it'll save your preferences. You don't have to do that, but I'm going to do it because I might crash my computer. Maya has a magnifying feature, right? So like in Photoshop, you click on the magnifying glass and you can marquee something and it zooms you right into that. Maya has that as well. So Control-Alt and left mouse button, and I can marquee something and it'll zoom right into it. I had one file, I don't know what it was. Every time I did that, it crashed. Every time. That's all I did was just zoom in like that and it would crash. Now notice how I Control-Alt and left mouse button and I drag to the right and I'm zooming in. There's a little plus sign on that icon. See it? Okay. If I Alt, Control, click and drag and I drag to the left, look what happens there. It goes minus. Okay? So Maya is a very smart interface in that they've tried their best to make sure that things work together the way they should. So if one way does something, the other way will do the opposite of it. Okay? All right. All right. In Cinema, if we wanted to select components of an object, we would go over to the left side of the screen and we would pick on the points, the edges, or the polygons or faces of that item. Right? Remember that? In Maya, we don't have to do that. That is like the worst way to have to work on anything. Hold down your right mouse button right on the object. Okay? Besides this cluster bomb of stuff underneath it, edges, vertex, or face. They're all right there. Okay? So go to face, and now we can grab on any one of these faces. Okay? Now here's a cool little trick. Cinema has this too. It's not as cool as Maya's though. So if you just click on any one face, and then you know the greater than, less than signs from math class that are on your keyboard? Okay, hold down Shift and then hold the greater than sign, which is the right one. Okay, so what that does is it takes what we have selected and it grows that selection out, and then Shift less than sign will shrink that down. Okay? So you see how it's smart. So if one thing's going to do this, then the one next to it or the opposite of it is going to do the opposite thing. Okay? Should be good. We can also do some smart selection. So in Cinema, it had some stuff, but not everything was set up like this. I'm going to zoom in a bit so I can get closer to the other faces. I want to select a loop of faces all the way around this. Okay? So if I click on one face, hold Shift and double click the face next to it, and double click, it loops it. Okay? Again, always trying to figure out the fastest way to do stuff. Let's do that again. Click on one face, hold Shift, double click the one next to it, and it goes around. Okay. Even if I go up and down, you'll see that it does it too. Okay, so very quickly you can start selecting faces and doing things with those faces. Okay, in Cinema we would do, if we wanted to extrude this, we would either hit the D key, right? We found out today that also the Control key, if you drag the Control key with the arrow, that extrudes too. Did you know that, Meg? I know that you do. In Maya, we can go up here, okay? I'm going to show you the one here. So this is the Edit Mesh. A polygon, which is what we're looking at, is a mesh. These are all the things that we can do to that polygon. Okay, these are all the different features. Nothing is going to change as far as what worked in the intro class is still going to work here, right? So if I was to create a bookcase, your very first day or very first week in Cinema, you made a bookcase, right? Or a desk, whatever. I would do the same process. I would start off with a mesh. I would divide it up. I would grab faces and just extrude them in. That's the exact same process. If I wanted nice smooth edges, I would bevel the entire thing, okay? So don't get lost on the fact that we're now in Maya, that it's different. That part is still the same, all right? Maya just does a better job of handling all that stuff. If I wanted to extrude this, if I hold down Shift, like I said, you can go up here and you can look at all the menu items that are there. But if I hold down Shift and I right click and hold, what this does is it brings up a marking menu, okay? So Maya has these little hidden menus throughout the entire interface. So it's basically saying, hey, you have faces selected, you've Shift right clicked, here's all the stuff you can do to those faces. The stuff that's up here is the stuff that you are most likely to do with those faces. If you look right there, extrude face, right? If you look over here, bevel face. You won't see split in here because I wouldn't do a split face to a polygon face selected, okay? So if I want to extrude this, I would just go to extrude. And then here's what is awesome about Maya, is that it just applied that extrusion, okay? So in Cinema, we select faces, we go to extrude, and then we have to actually like do something to get it to extrude. Maya, it happens instantaneously. So now I'm going to grab this blue arrow and pull it out. Okay? So if we were inside Cinema, we grabbed faces, we extruded them, and then we decided, hey, I want to pull that out more, and I grabbed it and pulled it again, it would extrude it again. Okay? Maya will not do that. All of the stuff that we are hitting on right here are called actions, okay? The stuff inside of Cinema are tools. We go to the extrude tool and we can extrude a face. In Maya, we say extrude this, and it extrudes it, but it just keeps it there. Now we're moving it away. So if I pull this arrow out more, you'll see that it just adjusts it. And this little box that popped up, this is going to be your best friend. These are the top things that people will typically do with that tool. One of them is thickness. We don't need to worry about thickness right now. One of them is offset. One of them is divisions. Another one is keep faces together. If you click on the word on keep faces together, look what it just did. It's amazing. Okay. Now what I want to do is grab something else. So I'm going to grab some more faces. So boom, 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 boom. And grab a couple more. There we go. Okay. Now notice how I clicked on one face and then I went down the line and grabbed all the other ones. This should work. If I shift double click way far down here, see how it filled in that row, right? So it's another time saver. I'm going to extrude again. Now, I don't have to go back to Shift, right-click, go to Extrude Face. I don't have to go up here to Extrude. All I have to do is hit G. G is whatever I just did, redo that command again. So if I hit G, it just extruded again. And then I can grab this blue arrow and pull out the blue arrow again. Okay? you'll use basically 3 to 4 tools. We'll be using extrusion a lot. We'll be using bevels a lot. You'll be using split a lot. Okay? And when I say split, there's edge looping and a couple other tools that are all within that same area. But those 3 are ones that you'll typically use for most modeling practices. That's the same thing as inside of Cinema. It's just going to be inside Maya now. Okay? Now when I want to get out of this mode and I want to get back to being able to grab the entire object and move it, I hold down my right mouse button on the object and I say Object Mode. Okay? So hold down the right mouse button on your object and then go to Object Mode. Now, do you notice anything about the colors that are different? This is green. When we were in face mode, do you see the colors? They're blue. Okay? So that's our indicator as to what mode we're in. Again, it's trying to be a smarter system so that it allows us to see what mode we're actually in. There's a difference between moving something in object mode and moving something in component mode. Also notice if I click on my object, here's my original polysphere. Here is polyextrude 1. Here's polyextrude 2. So all the stuff I've already done to it, it's saving all that information. Now you can edit those to a point. Okay? Maya remembers exactly what happened. So if I were to go to polyextrude phase 2, and I hit the T key, it brings back this little arrow, and then I could tweak how far out that comes. So if I realize it went too far, I could push it back. Okay? You cannot do that inside of Cinema. It's like not available. I can click on extrude face 1, because that was the Mohawk area, and I can still tweak that. Okay? Now here's the stuff that I can't tweak. If I go back to the polysphere and I start editing the radius has nothing to do with the topology of it. It has nothing to do with how many faces are on this thing. It's simply a matter of size. But as I start tweaking that, notice how the distance here is getting smaller, right? So as I scale this up and up and up, they're getting actually like smaller little chubbier pieces. Okay? So to a point, I could use radius and still kind of tweak stuff. Now watch what happens when I start playing with the subdivisions. So if I take these instead of 20 subdivisions going around this way, 20 subdivisions going that way, and I put one of these to 10, it totally changed the entire thing. Okay? Maya remembers you selected face 1, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13, and you pulled them out. Now I've moved where those numbers are. So it still pulls out 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11, or whatever it is, but it's moved them into a different spot. Okay? That was actually as horrible as they typically get. Let's put this at 10 also. There we go. Okay? So I still could tweak these kinds of things afterwards, but the point is I may not want to tweak them at a certain point. Stuff like pulling faces out further, maybe changing the radius on a bevel, I would definitely want to do, but going that far down, you typically don't. Okay? So once I get to the point where I'm like, cool, I love the way this model looks, then I'm going to go to my delete history. And if my shelf was up, I would just click that button. Otherwise, I'm just going to go here and say delete history. And that goes away. Okay? So this is just the basics of what we're going to be getting ourselves into. Okay? So now we're going to take it back a bit further. Let's all delete whatever you have there. Make sure you're in object mode, so your object is what color? Green. And then we delete it. Just hit the backspace key. And then we're going to create a polygon cube. Was anyone in here last modeling class? No one was. So last modeling class, just so you can see us, one of our assignments was we modeled gears. And we started with a cylinder and we did some extrusions and whatever else. In 2018, they have a gear as one of their basic shapes. Yeah, it's a gear. And then you can tweak all the settings here for what you want the gear to look like. Right, it's amazing. Ignore the fact, too, that my stuff looks squished. The projector is just squishing my image. It is actually a perfectly square up on my screen. Okay. So what we want to do here is we want to take this cube and we want to do just some very basic deformations to it, okay? So let's grab one of the faces here. So you're going to right click and go to face. Grab one of the faces. And we're going to extrude it. Okay? So right click, go to face, click the face. And then we're going to hold down which button combination? Shift and right click. I have to look too. Okay, so we're going to hold down shift and right click, and we're going to go to extrude face. Okay. So that extruded the face. Right now that face is on top of itself. Okay, we're not going to move it yet. What we want to do is we want to shrink it down. Okay, in Cinema there was an extrude inner that would shrink stuff down. In Maya it's all in one tool. Okay, so if we go to this offset here and we just click on it and type in like 0.25, it's a perfect size. It's awesome. Okay, so that looks pretty good the way that is. I'm going to leave that where it is. Now I'm going to go to the other side and do the same thing. I'm going to click on that face. And then what key is my redo command key? G. Yep. And then I'm going to type in 0.25 for that offset too. History, right? So if you look at the history over there, you can see I have all of these extrudes. How many should I have for this object that we created? 2, right? We did one on this side, one on that side. Now when you do a character or something, you're not going to know I should probably have 17 extrudes for this character. You should just know I extruded, there's that menu. I didn't extrude 12 times, right? So you just have to be aware of that as you're working. Alright, cool. Alright, so now what I want to do is I want to connect these two faces. Okay? So I have one face on this side, one face on that side. I just want to bring those two faces together so that it basically creates a hole inside here. And this is why we don't use a hole tool, because there's better tools out there. So make sure you've clicked on both faces. Okay? And you'll use shift key to grab both faces. And then I want to do something to these faces, so I'm going to hold down shift and right click, and that will bring up my menu of things you can do to faces. So I want to go down to bridge, and it's like right down here is where bridge is located. Okay, so you can just go right to it and then just let go. This is going to be an area of Maya that's always going to be like a sucky part, but the reason that they do it is for specific things. When you do an extrusion, so if I grab this and I extrude and I pull this up, it may be hard to see, but my extrude is actually selected right now. Okay, my actual extrude thing. So if I shift click this and that, that's selected, plus these three faces are selected. So that's why the extrude wasn't working. So by clicking off of this and then clicking on those, then it would work. Okay. Alright, so now we have this random object here. Okay. Let's put the object onto a layer. So we're going to go down here to the display layers, and you'll see the little button on the far right. That means make a new layer and assign it to it. Now, before you click the button, if your object is not in object mode, green mode, it will not assign it to that layer. So right click and hold, go to object mode, and then you can click on that far right button. And then you can double click and rename it weird cube thing. Okay, so we made sure we're in green object mode. We then clicked on this far right button that made a layer. We double clicked it, called it weird cube thing, whatever you want to call it. We don't have as many icons as Cinema would have, but you'll see we do have a V for visibility. We have a P for I'm not sure what. And then this far right one is for changing the mode, okay? So T for template means that we're going to see a wireframe representation of this that we can't select, okay? So sometimes because of speed of working, we may want to keep it in template mode. We also have an R for reference, meaning that it's in full color mode, but again, we still can't select it, okay? And then we have a clear, which means we can select things. If you had a character, sometimes the character's controls are on one layer so that you can grab them and move them around, while the character's geometry is on another layer that's referenced and locked so you can't actually move it, okay? Because you don't want to move, like if I have a character, I don't want to move the geometry away from the controls. The controls are what control where the geometry is supposed to be, okay? So this is as good as this cube is going to get for now, all right? So we're going to delete history. Again, if you have your shelf button, click your delete history on the shelf button. Otherwise, just go to that. All right, so there's my weird cube thing. So what we want to do now is we're going to go through the entire process of what it would take to then give this a texture that looks better than just the default stuff we've been used to, okay? So we need to do what before we add a cool texture to this? Think of the cartoon box. What was that? UV, okay? So typically this is an area that people hate. In Maya, it's a lot better than it was inside of Cinema, okay? So the first thing we want to do is assign a checkerboard texture to this. The reason we assign a checkerboard is so we can make sure that the texture is square. If it's not a checkerboard, we can't really test to see if it's square. So you're going to right-click, hold on a second. They changed something in 2018. We may not have to do this. Let me just check real quick. UV editor. Yes, we don't have to do it. Never mind. Awesome. Okay, so we don't have to add a checkerboard to this. Hooray. We will go to UV and go to the UV editor. Okay, in Cinema, remember, it brought us to that different interface. There was a whole bunch of like crazy stuff going on. It was like ridiculous. Under your view, nope, textures, under textures, you can go to checker map. Okay, and what that's going to do is it's going to put a checkerboard on top of your object so you can see if it is square. And what we should see is that certain aspects, like this side here and that side and this side and that side, are definitely square. We haven't touched those, so they're going to be square. This side here, though, we don't know what's going on there. Yes, it is. Okay? So now this is where UV editing or UV manipulation or laying out can get tricky. We have to decide what is the best way to take this 3D object and cut it and flatten it out so that we can put a cool texture on it. Okay, that's what we have to figure out. So for an object like this, I'm just going to hit this texture off for a second so you can see it. For an object like this, we basically have this face here, we have this face here, this face, that face, that face, and then these individual faces on the inside, okay? Those are all the ones that are kind of facing the same direction. Your goal when you do UV layout is to have, number one, squares all over the place. So every single side should have squares. There shouldn't be any stretched out crazy. A little bit's fine, like a little bit of stretch is fine, but nothing crazy, okay? And then we also want to have as few pieces as possible / an optimized checkerboard area or an optimized layout area, okay? So let's look at this area real quick before we do anything at all. This square, do you see that black square that's around my white box here? So this black square right here, okay, that's my UV coordinates. That's where I have to lay out my jigsaw puzzle of this shape, okay? It has to fit within this box, and it has to still remain squares. Also remember, my image is stretched, so if you see stretchiness here, I may not actually have it just because of the projector. So, something like this shape, I'm going to use what's called automatic mapping, Okay, it's very similar to that button we would click inside of Cinema that would automatically lay stuff out. And then what I'm going to do is automatically map it and then put pieces together that it doesn't automatically put together. Okay? So before we do that, we make sure everything is defaulted. So all my translates and rotates for that object are at 0. Do you see how mine are at 0? And yours are at 0 too? Cool. All my scales are set to 1. This is actually the most important one. Anyone scales not 1? Cool. If they were off that, if they were like 2s or 3s or 1.75 or whatever, we would go to Modify Freeze Transformation, and it would automatically reset all of these numbers to 0s and 1s. Okay. Now we're going to go back to, oops, let me put my checkerboard on again. Holy cow, that's hard to see too. All right. Let me dim this a little bit. That's it. No, that's not it. View, dim image. Where is that one at? Image. There it is. Image dim. There we go. Okay, so under image, you can go to dim, and what that will do is it'll dim the image so you don't go blind looking at that checkerboard. Holy cow. All right, so under UV, you're going to go to automatic option box. Okay, so go to your UV menu on the very, very top, go to automatic, and then on the far right is a little option box. Click on the little option box. Okay, so these are the options. So in Cinema, I don't believe there were any option boxes at all. Okay, in Maya, there are. A lot of these tools that we go into, you'll see these tiny boxes. Those are options. So you can set the default options for things. Some stuff you can change later, some stuff you can't. Okay? You got it?
No.
It has a number of planes here. Okay? So we are dealing with a cube. How many sides does a cube have? 6. There we go.
That was rough.
That was rough. So a cube has 6 sides, so having 6 planes here is optimal. What it's going to do is it's going to take our object, I'll use this, it's going to take our object and it's going to project this way, it's going to project that way, it's going to project this way and that way, 6 different directions, okay? So what that means for us is that every face is facing one of these planes, okay? If we had a sphere, we may do more planes, okay? We may do a different kind of mapping. But for right now, we're going to keep it simple, 6. We always want to do less distortion versus fewer pieces. In some cases, I would use fewer pieces, but for this, less distortion should be fine. We shouldn't get a huge difference either way. Don't need to worry about this. Don't need to worry about that. Into square, yes, yes, yes. Okay. So everything here should be good. Just the only thing we changed was less distortion. Now we hit project. And now we get this. Okay? All right. So now if we look at my shape, do you see how I now have squares over the entire thing? Okay, so click your apply button and see if you get squares all over your entire shape. They will not get squares. One of the things we'll find too is that I punch in my settings and it works perfectly, and then somebody's going to punch in the exact same settings and it's not going to work at all. You can figure out why. Because of Maya. That's exactly it. Okay. So point number 1 we wanted to get was squares all over the place. We have that. Okay. So every single one of these sides has squares. We also need to make sure that the squares are the same size. Okay. They are. These squares here and these squares there are the same size. If they weren't a different size, I'm just going to show you real quick. I'm just going to shrink these down. Do you see how these are super big and these are super tiny-ish? Okay? So what that means for us, I'm just going to do it. Whenever you have this small, and this is going to be like a backwards way to think, out here it's going to be big. Okay? Because what's happening is this item is saying only grab this part of it, and then the 3D world, it stretches that part out to fit whatever it needs to. So when something is like this, and it's this tall, that means that there's going to be less texture in this area than there would in this area. Okay? So what this means in a different way, I guess, would be this is going to be a flat image that we're going to draw in Photoshop. We have so many pixels that are going to go across, so we have to make sure that it's uniform. So as long as the squares are close enough uniform, we should be good. Okay? Now, we don't have to do this next step, but I want to do it because, again, it's all about keeping everything nice and neat. Okay? So I want to make sure that my pieces up here are all joined together. The nicer they are, the easier it's going to be to put a texture on them. Okay? So even though we can't see it happening, this face here and this face here are probably right next to each other. Yep, right there. Okay? So in here I can go to faces and I can click this face and that face, and there they are. Now they should share a common edge. So what I want to do is in Maya it's broken those two faces apart, and it looks like they have two separate edges, but they don't. Those two edges are actually together, or should be together. Okay? So I'm going to right click and go to edge, and as I hover over any of these edges up here on these small little clusters, you'll see how it's grabbing both of those. Okay? So I want to click on one, and I'm going to go up to cut and sew, and just say move and sew. Look at how I click on this one and I move and sew it. And I click on this one and I move and sew it. Now if I go here, do you see how this edge and that edge are the same thing? Right? That's the shared edge. If I tried to move and sew that, my flat piece would then collapse on itself. Okay? So we don't want to have that. We cannot have ever overlapping UVs. Okay? To show it another way, if I had a piece of paper here, someone's eBay thing, perfect. This is our flat image that we have. If we tried to connect these two edges, somehow they would go like that, and we would have overlapping UVs. And so what that would mean is any texture I put here is also going to end up there. Okay, we want to keep this as flat as possible because we're trying to get it to be a flat laid out image. Okay? So by the time you're done with this, you should have it looking something like that. Now you could go further. Okay, we're not going to on this one because it's not necessary. But we could go further and start connecting these edges together. So you see how as I hover over these ones, they're also connected to stuff, right? So as I hover over this edge is actually connected to this edge. Okay? You don't need to do this part. I'm just going to show it so you can see it. And I'm going to move and sew that. And I'm going to go to this edge. And I'm going to move and sew that. This edge and move and sew that. I'm going to go to that edge and move and sew that. And move and sew that. Okay? So I could move and sew this entire thing so it's lined up like this, but look at how now it doesn't have a nice layout inside that box. In order to do that, I would have to shrink everything else down. Okay? So that's why I wouldn't want to do all of that stuff. I want to keep these boxes separated. On some of these, the edges are like randomly placed. Okay, just to show that. If I go to automatic and I go to edge, mine are right next to each other. Okay? Some of them that other people have are a bit scattered. So they're coming up like this. So when they go to edge, it's doing that. Okay? That's perfectly fine. When we do the move and sew, it automatically knows which ones to sew it to. Okay? So watch how easily I could do this too, because this is what we all did, right? We clicked on one, we went here, we went to move and sew, and we clicked on the other one, we went here to move and sew, and then we clicked on the other one, and went to move and sew. And so we ended up with these 4 panels, right? Right. So if I know every time I have face, 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 face like this, what I'm going to end up with, which is going to look like that thing, I can do this. Grab all the edges, shift click 1 to deselect it, and then move and sew that. Okay? That way it's a lot simpler. I know what it's going to look like in the end. It's simply a matter of getting the experience to know that's what it's supposed to look like. Okay? So, like I was saying, it doesn't matter where these are located in this box. Ideally, I like to have them kind of away from the edges and giving them a little bit of room around each one. Okay? So if I can just kind of nudge these over a bit, that helps out. Now the way that I'm moving these is by UV shell. So if I right click and go to UV shell, then I can grab that whole shell and move that shell around. So create a little bit of a margin around each one of your areas. You can see the checkerboard is off. It's annoying to look at inside this editor. I just need to have it laid out like that. Now if this was a design project, we could actually just go into Photoshop with that image, just like we did on the cereal box in the intro class, and we could put our cereal box or whatever it is we want right on top of there. We're going to take it into a different program that's going to do something super duper awesome with it. Okay? I'm just going to double check one more thing before we go into that program. Sometimes I will grab all the stuff and just size it up huge, just because I want to check the direction. Okay, just want to make sure there's nothing kind of weird, like that one's upside down, but that's fine. Okay, so that's good. All right, so I've made sure that we have all squares. Every single side has squares all over the place. None of these are, the squares are different sizes. Okay, they're also not overlapping anywhere in the UVs. And they also fit nicely inside that square inside here, right there. Okay? Now why this is important is because we're making one file right now. We're making one file that's going to fit right in that spot. And if anything sticks out of it, it's going to then try to make two files. And then that becomes harder to work with. Okay? And then we're going to have to blend stuff and whatever else. Keep it simple. All right. So we should probably save this. So we haven't saved this. We haven't done anything. Holy cow, it's been how many hours? Do not save yet. We have to set something up. I'm going to delete my history, so you can delete your history too. We have to set up our projects. Remember I said on our cheat sheet we have this list of projects here that we want to create those folders. So let's tell Maya to do that for us. So under File, go to Project Window. Okay, the top area is the current project we're working on. So right now, we're probably all in the default project folder, right? Probably. We're going to click on New, and we're going to direct it to our folder. So I'm going to go to my computer, my D drive or P drive for you guys, and I'm going to go right inside the 2520 folder and say Select. For my project name, I'm going to go underscore or Sarcona underscore basic workflow. Okay, so the location is your D drive or your P drive, wherever you're saving your stuff to, and then your current project is your last name underscore basic workflow. Okay, so this location should end with 2520. Okay, so mine is D Sarcona F17 2520. Yours is on the P drive, so yours will be P, whatever your last name is, 2520. Okay, once you're cool with that, you can hit Accept. So we don't need to physically create all of these folders. Maya will do it for us. Incredibly helpful. It can be confusing too, because instead of having the 3 or 4 we had originally, we have all of these. Okay. Now the benefit of that is Maya will automatically know what to do with all these folders. In Cinema, we had to constantly say, here's where our textures folder is. Here's where our textures folder is. Every single time we came in. Every single time we went home. It was annoying. With this, we don't have to do that. Okay? So here's where the main folders are. Scenes is where our scenes go. What we're going to be saving right now in a second is where this file is going to go. Maya has 2 extensions, MA and MB. Those are the two it has. Maya ASCII and Maya binary. Typically it's going to be a binary. Occasionally you'll see an ASCII file. Ignore assets. When we render stuff out, it goes into the images folder automatically. Okay? When we get render man, it goes into a different spot, but for right now it's going to go in images. Source images are any textures that we create. So when we bring in a texture into Maya, it automatically looks in the source images folder. The rest of these, except for autosave, you'll probably never need to get into right now. Okay? Maya has specific uses for them. Stuff like, where's the cache? Well, render data, it stores render stuff in there. Sound I use for random sound things. You can put scripts in there. Movies, sometimes I'll put movies in there or take movies out. Never use a time editor folder. There's also some other folders that it'll create too, like cache and whatever else. Yeah, here we go. Okay, we don't need to worry about those. We'll be using 3 of these folders: images, source images, and scenes. Those are the 3 that we'll typically use. All right, so we hit accept. So now we can go to File, Save, Scene. Now what should happen is it should bring you to, just like I'm seeing here, see how it says Sarcona Basic Workflow? Don't click in there yet, okay? That's my folder, that's my project folder. I want to go down here. On the left, this is my current project I'm working on. I want to click on Scenes and then give it a name. So I'm going to call this Sarcona _cube _001. So click on Scenes on the left side and give it a name. Okay, you'll get a warning that pops up. This is that warning I was talking about. This is the student version, can't make money off of it, big deal. A fun fact, in case you did want to make money off it, you can export it out as a different file format and re-import it into a different program like Blender, and then it actually doesn't realize that it was made in Maya. Yeah, if you're that if you're that worried about it.
Loopholes.
Yeah, loopholes. It's actually not terribly expensive too. If you wanted to do freelancing in Maya for less than, I think it's $200 a month, you can get a Maya license. Now, if you're freelancing in Maya, typically you're going to be making more than $200 a month doing that. So it's not a huge cost at all. Seems like it, but it's not. All right. So there is our object. Okay. Now, what we want to do is then take this object and bring it into a program called Substance Painter. So on these computers is Substance Painter. So open up Substance Painter. And do the correct way, type in Substance, and then pick Substance Painter from the list. Boom, 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 boom. A new version is available. I'll have to get that later. Received. All right, it's the same concept, okay? This is the basic pop-up screen that you would typically get when you start up Maya, right? Here's some tutorials, here's some information, samples, whatever. Just hit close. All right, so we need to know how do we get our file into here. Every software is different, okay? When we went from Cinema into ZBrush, we had to figure out what format ZBrush wanted. When we went from Cinema into Keyshot, we had to figure out which file format Keyshot wanted, okay? So the same thing here. So I'm going to go to File, New. All right, so we have a template. So what this is going to do is it's going to create some default properties that it'll populate our object with. So we want to do the PBR Metal Rough HQ shelf. Okay, so go to PBR Metal Rough HQ shelf. All right, then we're going to hit select. All right, so I'm going to go to this one. It should be similar enough that we could do that, and then by next week I should have the updated version. This should be fine there. Okay. For the document resolution, this is one of the cool things about it. If you've used, has anyone used Mari before? Is that Tyler? No? Okay. So Mari is a texture painting application. It allows us to paint a texture right on top of our object. Okay. This software is it's based on the ability to be flexible. So you can work at a lower resolution, and then right when you're almost done, crank up your resolution. That way it works very quick, and then the end results are much more detailed. So I'm going to leave my document resolution at 2048. You have that too, right? 2048. Okay. So now we need to add our geometry. So we're going to go to Select up here, where it says Mesh. And this is how we find out what kind of geometry it wants. Okay? So if we click on this, you'll see that there is a whole list of names right here. Now I believe that this wants us to give an OBJ file. That's typically, if you go from one 3D app to another, an OBJ is one that will typically go between multiple areas. So I'm going to jump to, just to verify it, I'm going to jump to my this PC, I'm going to jump to this, and here, and here. Okay, so if I go into my scenes folder, it's not listed there, okay, which means that it doesn't allow importing of Maya files, which means that I do have to export it out as something else. If you remember from Keyshot, Keyshot does allow you to import directly from Cinema 4D, and it will let you import directly from Maya, okay? So I'm going to jump back to Maya. The hotkey to jump between programs is Alt-Tab, if you're old school, and then Window-Tab, no, not Window-Tab. Control-Tab? No, it was Window-Tab. I think I just disabled it. It's Alt-Tab. Okay. Well, Windows Tab does this cool thing when it's not disabled that like shows all the windows there. It's pretty sweet. So I need to export this thing out. So I'm going to go to my object, and I have it selected in object mode. I'm going to go to File and say Export Selection. Okay, so I've grabbed my cube in object mode. I go to File, I go to Export Selection. Make sure you're in Maya though to do that. So I'm going to call this exported underscore low res. And then from the file type, I'm going to choose OBJ export. Okay? So exported underscore low res, files of type OBJ export. Does anyone not have OBJ export when you get to that point? You do not have it? Okay. A couple do not. Sometimes, and this is one of those funny things with Maya, it doesn't load all of the necessary file things. So I'm just going to cancel mine real quick and then show you. Under Window, Settings, Preferences, Plugin Manager, these are all the plugins that you have available for Maya. So it doesn't have all of them loaded just to save on memory. Window, Settings, Preferences, Plugin Manager. So further down, like halfway-ish, they're in alphabetical order, you'll see one that says obj export.mll. Load it and auto-load it, okay? That way it'll load that ability to export out an OBJ every time. There's also other stuff in here you could turn on and turn off. Eventually we'll get to more of it. All right, so I'm going to do that again. Export selection, low res cube 001 OBJ export. Okay, you can call it whatever you want. I want to make sure I'm signifying this is a low res cube. Eventually we'll make a high res cube and put that in there too. But this will be my low res cube, and it's 01 just so that in case I decide to make 2 or 3 or 4, I have different iterations. Then you can just hit export. Okay, cool. Everyone has an OBJ low res cube. All right, so we've exported out our low res. So now when we come back into Substance Painter by hitting Alt Tab again, or just figuring out how to get to it another way, the low res cube is listed. Okay, so you can pick it from the list. When you're done picking it from the list, just hit OK. Your interface might look a little bit different than mine, but it should be very similar in the fact that we can spin around in one of our views. One of them is probably a UV layout, and then the other one is just stuff. That looks neat. So, our viewport just like we would have in Maya, our UV layout just like we would have in Maya. The layers are like Photoshop paint layers. Okay, so if we wanted to add different layers and stacks and colors and whatever else, we can do that. Over here, this is a texture set list. So we have one object in our scene. We have one material in our scene. We have one UV set in our scene. So we only have one grouping over here. If we had taken our UVs and they were scooted off of that original square, we would get 2 of these. Okay? If we assigned 2 different materials to this object, we would have 2 of those. If we brought in different objects with different UV sets, they would have 2 of those. Okay? So you'll see those more often, but just something to be aware of. All right. So what I want to do is go into this middle area and go to where it says Bake Textures and hit Bake. Okay? So right in the middle-ish area it says Bake Textures. You're going to click Bake. And what I'm going to do is, where's that button? Alright, I'll just use this anyway. I'm going to click on this little thing here. It says high quality or high definition meshes. Click on the top button of that little box. And then just reload in your low-res cube. Okay? So ideally what we would do, we have a low-res version of our cube that has like pretty ugly geometry like we have. Then we'd have a higher res version of our cube that has stuff like bevels, maybe some little division lines or something in there. And we would load in the high-res version right here. For now, keeping it simple, we just have the low-res we're loading for both. Okay? We should be good on everything else. We're just going to hit Bake. Okay? So what this is going to do is it's going to actually go through the surface and figure out what the surface looks like computationally. Okay? And what that means is it's going to try to figure out where are the corners, where are pieces of the surface like close together, and then it's going to create something. So you'll see your surface changes slightly once it's all done. That was super slight. Okay. All right. I'm gonna just squeeze this over. You don't need your UVs up. You can just do that. I think you could even go to View and turn off your UVs. Just go away. Oh. No. I gotta get my hotkeys again for this one. There's a hotkey that gets rid of that. I can't remember what it is right now. All right, let's do that. Okay. So, what that did is down here under that Bake Textures button now, you'll see that there's other stuff listed. So there's one that says normal, world space normal, ID, ambient occlusion, curvature, position, and thickness. Okay? So all of these things were generated based off of how that surface looks. So if I wanted to see these, I can hit the letter B on your keyboard, and it'll actually cycle through each one of those regions. Okay? So now we're actually seeing what it came up with. Okay? So for stuff like ambient occlusion, does anyone remember what that is? Go ahead.
Isn't it like when an object gets too close to something, you kind of see like kind of like a shadow?
Right. So it's called contact shadows is another name for it. So anytime you're close to, you have your two objects are close to each other. So whether it's a corner area like this, or inner corner, you'll create these little shadows on the inside. Okay? So that's what this is doing. If you look close, it's created these little contact shadows inside here. All right? Now what that does for us is it gives us a bit of depth to the surface that maybe wasn't there before, a little bit more definition in some of these other spots. So that's what that does. Here's the curvature. The curvature is actually looking at the surface to see where it's changing direction. And if you look at it, look right here in the corners, you can see that's where it's changing direction. It's picking that information up. Hit B again. This is our position This one is actually like an XYZ of where this stuff is located. So even though we can't see it physically, it actually is blending all the colors based on the world position of each point, which is kind of neat. And then this is the thickness, okay? So it's thickest in this middle area and thinnest on these areas here, or thickest in the other spots. Okay, get back to where we were, you just hit M to get back to that. Now, here's where we can start to apply some of our stuff to this. Down here is the shelf area. These are alphas, these are procedurals. I don't know why mine are split up so like weird like this. I don't know, whatever. I can just bunch these together, I should be able to. Nope, it's just gonna stay there, fine. I just wanna go to the smart materials. So in your tab, you should see a list. One of those lists is smart materials, okay? So click on your smart materials and you should pull up something like this, okay? What you're gonna do is find one that has a bit of detail to it. Like this aluminum one looks neat, but it doesn't have enough detail. My favorite one is this yellow machinery one. That one looks awesome. Okay. Now we're going to drag this yellow machinery one into our layers palette and then let go. All right, now looking at this shape, what this thing does is it takes our surface, it takes all those little maps that it generated, and it starts to put in details in an appropriate spot. So looking at this from the history of how this object was created, okay? Somebody manufactured this object and they put it on the table, and some guy went through, this is the part we're at now, and he spray painted it with this like bright yellow color, okay? And then what happened is they brought it into a machine shop and they put stuff on there and it bumped stuff and scratched stuff. That's where all of these little scuff marks are. Because of where the ambient occlusion was, remember it was on the inside here, look at how much more distressing there is right there and right there compared to over here or over there. Now we don't get a whole lot of stuff on this edge right now because we don't have a high enough resolution geometry to generate those maps. That's going to be the next stage, which we're going to get into next time. Yes, sir. Now to see that process happening, okay, just to back up a step, what we did, we went to the File New, we picked our geometry, we picked the template, and then we basically just hit OK, right? We baked the textures, which is just this button, and then we dropped in that thing. That's all we've done. Super quick. Like, once you get this process, it'll be incredibly quick. So now this stage, here's where all of this stuff comes in. So if I open up that little folder that we just dropped in, which is in my case called machinery, and I turn off all the layers, you'll see that we get back to basically just this metal base. That's the start of it. You can see it does have some reflection to it, right? Because I set metal as the base color for this specific one. And then what it does is it has layers. So there's a layer of dirt. So you can see the layer of dirt that's on top of it. Right? And then there's another layer of dust. So anything that's facing up, do you see how the dust only falls on that layer? And then there's a layer of rust. And the rust, like I said, is going to hit those areas where there's a lot of ambient occlusion and a lot of curvature. In this case, we don't have a lot of curvature happening. Now, all of these we can adjust. Each one of these things is basically painted a flat color, and there's a mask on it. So you know how Photoshop you have layer masks? That's what these are. This is the flat color, so this is just black or brown. And then the layer mask is where the rust comes in. So if I were to click on that rust, and then I clicked on this mask here, this is all the parameters that go into it. So if I wanted to control, here's the grunginess. If I wanted to control anything, I could take that contrast and pull it down. Take the balance and maybe pull it up. Okay? Now in a program like Mari, which is a hand-painted texture thing, if I wanted more rust, I have to paint more rust. and I have to move around the object and paint it. Here, this is procedural. I can just add it in there. Now what's neat about this is look at the reflection too. Remember how glossy it was right at the beginning? Do you see how in some areas, let me get really close to this, in some areas where it's still bright yellow, we have some nice gloss, but in those rusty areas there's nothing, right? So this is where this tool is like mind-blowingly awesome. It knows where it should be rusty and it knows where it should not be rusty. It knows where it should be glossy and it knows where it shouldn't. We even have a little bit of bump happening on here. You can see, if I get a bit closer, how we have these little like dots and pits and stuff in here, right? That's all a little bit of bump happening on this object. Okay, now if we don't like it, I can delete it. I just trash that layer, and then I can drag something else in here. It takes a second to calculate, and then there it is. Now these are the smart ones, so these are already set up. I can tweak them, I can modify them. As the semester goes on, we'll get more in detail into what we can do with this kind of stuff. Let's see, I'm going to grab this. I'm going to do this. You don't need to worry about doing this. I'm just going to add a fill layer. The fill layer basically overwrote everything, so you can see it's all gray. That's what my fill layer did. I'm going to choose a different color for this. Let's choose red. That's cool. I'm going to add a mask to this. Where's my mask? Add a black mask. Okay. So I've added a black mask to this layer. So what that does, just like Photoshop, it's not visible, right? So I've added this red color over the entire thing. A black mask hides the entire thing. So now if I go to that black mask and I start painting in white, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to reveal it, right? It's going to reveal that red. So that's where we can get into using some of these brushes. So just to show off some of the brushes. So you see how I just painted with white right there, and it has that little red notch knocked into it. I can also go to generators. No, not generators. There it is. No, that wasn't it. Oh, that was it. Okay, rust. Oh, I'm in the wrong one. Sorry. Physical paint. That's what we want. Alright, so these ones are physical paint brushes. So what they're going to do is interact with my surface. So all I have to do is put in a couple strokes and it'll start moving around based on my settings. So let's say that I have a spaceship or a airplane and I want it to look like there's like dirt and debris. I would most likely have that dirt and debris in the front line of that plane, right, as it's going forward, right, because as it's flying, that's where the dirt and debris is hitting the most. I can create brushes that would allow me to simulate that and create textures that would update it. That one is rust. Let me see. There's a rain one. Oh, here's a burn one. This one's kind of neat. I'm going to turn my alpha off. I don't need that. Okay. We'll just go right here. And which way does fire go? Up, right? So I go like that. Let's try that again. Physical paint. There we go. Apparently not. Fire goes all over the place. That's why it's so dangerous. Rain should go down. No, it's doing the same thing. I have something clicked wrong. Something is clicked wrong.
Maybe it's directional the way you move your mouse. So if you move, like you maybe drag down perhaps, it will go down.
No, it shouldn't. I should be able to just drag across and it does it. My view, typically it's across and I see all my menus exactly. I don't know why it's like off today. because I'm lecturing probably. Rain. Manual rain, regular rain. Yeah, I'll figure that part out. That's no big deal. Because it does work pretty awesomely when it does work correctly. Okay. So the point is, though, is that very quickly we can go into this program and we can create some very cool textures for some of our objects. Now, this is something that we would work in conjunction with Photoshop. So just like you did your cereal box before, right? We have a brand new cereal box. It looks beautiful in there. But now we want to make a junky cereal box. Now we can take one version of our cereal box and bring it into Substance, bring another image into Photoshop, make one pretty, make one ugly, put those two textures together, and then we would get this awesome looking cereal box. Okay? Especially for like games and stuff. Sweet. And then, like I said, we can delete stuff, and that's no big deal either. Cool. All right, so you can save this if you want to. We really didn't do anything yet. We're going to get into this again on Monday and start playing around with this more. But you would just go to Save As and put it inside of your folder. Now, keep in mind that these files can get huge, and I would put it inside of your Scenes folder too. I'm just going to call this Substance Cube 01. Okay, cool. All right, so save your file if you want to, close down Substance. Go back to Maya, save your Maya file, close down Maya. So I want to make sure you can see also how we want to end the day when we close out of our stuff. Yep, just save scene. Alright, so we have two things we need to back up. One of them is our folder. Okay, so we have our Sarcona F17, or whatever your name is, F17 folder. We also have our, mine's in a different spot, our Maya Preferences folder. Okay, so once Maya is closed down, go into the P drive, go into that Maya folder, right click on the 2018 folder and say cut. Then go into your folder, your F17 folder, and then just paste it. Okay? So what we've done is we've taken those preferences that we set up originally with our shelf and whatever else, and we've put it into our folder. So now we would go and we would back up just that F17 folder onto our hard drive or onto our Dropbox or wherever it is we're saving our stuff. Okay? And then once you're done, you're good.